Skeletons of the Marital Closet by Tang. Chapter 1961. Uncle Orem, we've met so many times, but today is the first time we've met Ivy, so of course she gets special treatment, Joshua said. But, you call her by her name, and you call me uncle. Is that appropriate? She's my girlfriend, Orem asked. Joshua thought about it and realized that he did not address her correctly. Should he change and call Orem by his name too? That did not sound right either. It was awkward. Calling a grown man like Orem as it was excessive. However, Joshua could not bear to call Ivy an aunt. She was a fairy sister. What should we do? Joshua looked conflicted. Should we call her Aunt Ivy, or should we call him Orem? Nicole also fell into deep thought. It's okay, either is fine. You can call us whatever you want. Aunt is fine, my name is fine, both are okay, Ivy replied. Joshua immediately shook his head. No, it has to be Ivy, Fairy Ivy. Uncle Orem is just teasing you, don't take it seriously. Orem deliberately had a straight face. I'm very serious, both of you. Do you think I'm too old? The question was not over yet. On the other side, Gale also chimed in. Joshua and Nicole, you both like Ivy so much that you're calling her a fairy? Gale asked. Yes, Mommy, she's so beautiful, like a doll. Yes, Mommy, don't you think she's beautiful? Gale said. So, is she more beautiful, or am I? Joshua and Nicole were both stunned. This question was too hard to answer. It was a tough dilemma. Nicole kept silent. Joshua did not look at Gale. Gale kept sighing. I worked so hard to give birth to you, raise you, send you to school, help you with your homework, and in the end I never once heard you call me a fairy. Okay, you're our fairy mom, Joshua immediately responded. Nicole chimed in. Yes, Mommy, you've always been a fairy, do we even need to say it? Gale could not help but burst into laughter, leaning on Shawn's shoulder. Coming up with that answer really put them in a bind. Shawn wrapped his arm around her waist, leaned down to her ear and whispered, In my heart, you've always been a fairy. My fairy Gale? My fairy wife? Although it sounded a bit fake, Gale still felt very touched. Ivy held Joshua's hand on one side and Nicole's hand on the other, with a big smile on her face. She had not been this happy in a long time, not because of being called a fairy, but because the two kids were just so lovable. All right, Orem, Gale, stop teasing the kids. They're almost at a loss for how to answer, Ivy said. Gale replied, I'm just testing their ability to respond and adapt on the spot. Orem also said, You're my girlfriend, they call me uncle, and you by your name, does that sound right? Orem, you're really lucky and happy, Orem. How did you manage to win over Ivy? Joshua quickly corrected himself. What, you want me to impart my experience to you? Chapter 1962. I think your taste is somewhat weird. There are hits and misses. Orem was puzzled. Joshua continued. Natalie is really not good at all. She schemes, saying one thing to your face and another behind your back. I saw it during the time I lived at your house. Your good taste, however, led you to pursue my fairy Ivy. Orem, you must treat her well, you can't let an angel suffer. Then he quietly approached Orem and said in a low voice, You have a good eye for liking Mommy too. After all, Shawn was still around, so he could not let him overhear. After quickly finishing, Joshua pretended to cough twice. No problem, no problem. This means that the best things come last. What came before was all about enduring trials of love. Now is the time to reap true love, he reasoned, sounding very logical. Yes, being able to have her is my fortune. Orem nodded. You're more than fortunate, she's practically a fairy who descended from heaven to be by your side. Joshua said, When I grow up, I want to marry Ivy too. Nicole looked at him disdainfully. Joshua, Ivy is with Uncle Orem. Joshua looked at Ivy and said, Can you wait for me to grow up? When I grow up, I'll marry you. Oh dear, Joshua, Ivy is going to marry Uncle Orem. She won't marry you at all. Wait, Before he could finish, Gale had already covered his mouth. Of course she would marry Orem. Children are loose cannons, he's just speaking casually, don't take it to heart. Gale chuckled. Joshua pulled her hand down. I'm serious, fairy. Covered his mouth even tighter, and then threw him to Shawn. Take care of your son. Shawn firmly took him, and they looked at each other disdainfully. Okay, fairy sister has chosen Uncle Orem, that's settled, Joshua sighed. It's because he arrived first, and I came later. When I grow up, I'll definitely marry a very, very beautiful girl too. At such a young age he already knew he wanted a beautiful wife. Shawn said, You need a virtuous woman, not just someone beautiful. Isn't Mommy beautiful? This question, if asked to an average person, might not be able to answer, or they might be choked up. Shawn swooped in smoothly. Of course she's beautiful, she's the most beautiful in the world in my eyes. She has both beauty and virtue, Shawn said. Is Ivy not virtuous? How would I know if she's virtuous or not? You should ask Orem. Joshua immediately looked at Orem. Ivy is definitely virtuous, right? Orem naturally replied, right. Joshua, have you ever heard a saying? Shawn said. He looked innocent. What? The more beautiful a woman is, the more likely she is to deceive someone. Chapter 1963. If you want to marry someone beautiful, then you better see if you have the skills to handle her. Joshua thought about it and retorted, so, did mommy trick you? Everyone was speechless. Even if you knew she tricked you, you would have willingly played along, right? Joshua continued, so by your logic, since Ivy is so beautiful, she must be the best at tricking people, right? Did she trick you, Uncle Orem? Shawn remained unfazed. He replied, you'll understand when you grow up. Although Joshua's words were innocent, Ivy almost could not keep her expression in check. She was not as good as Shawn. Fortunately, Orem was not looking at her, so he did not notice. After all, whether it was Ivy tricking Orem, or Orem tricking Ivy, or both deceiving the other, it was all about who could be more skillful and emerge as the true winner. Alright. You two always end up bickering. What are we here for today, guys? Do you remember? Gale changed the subject. Nicole answered obediently. We're here to see Uncle Orem and his girlfriend have a meal and play together. We brought gifts for Uncle Orem and Ivy to show our appreciation. The kids had a deep affection for Orem. After all, he was the man who had been with them and helped them with their move from their small town to the big city. To them, he was a respected elder. Seeing Ivy now, Joshua no longer had the urge to pair Orem with Gale. Uncle Orem and her were a perfect match. Besides, the more he looked at Shawn and Mommy, the more they seemed like a couple. Everything was perfect. They had all found their life partners. Now, you two go help the driver bring the gifts in. Delivering the gifts personally shows sincerity and meaning, Gale said. Nicole and Joshua left the living room together. They're still so young, can they carry them? I hope they don't hurt themselves, Ivy said, concerned as she watched them leave. Don't worry, they will be fine. They're not that fragile, Gale reassured with a smile. Ivy smiled back. I haven't raised kids myself, so I don't have much experience. I've told you, having one of your own will give you all the experience you need, Gale responded. Her cheeks warmed as she glanced at Orem. The implication was clear. Gale added, kids are wonderful. They might be a bit annoying sometimes, but mostly, they're well-behaved. Ivy, you're so beautiful. Don't waste those genes. If you have a daughter, she'll be a beauty, and your son will be a handsome boy. My child, Ivy started to imagine. However, she found herself unable to picture it. Who would she have a child with? Certainly not Orem. Orem would not touch her. Even if he did, would she want his child? A wave of sadness washed over Ivy. She appeared as a glamorous star, but in reality, her future felt bleak to her. She wanted success in her career, to become a top actress starring in seminal work that would be remembered for years to come. At the same time, she longed for warmth in her personal life, a cozy home, a considerate husband, and adorable children. Chapter 1964. Yes, your child. Anyway, we have a boy and a girl in our family. No matter what gender your child is, there's a chance to become in-laws, Gale said, winking. Ivy and Orem smiled. He squeezed Ivy's hand, his thumb gently stroking the back of it. He seemed very much in love with her. However, the bitter reality of it all was known to Shawn, understood by Orem, and deeply felt by Ivy. Only Gale was blissfully unaware. Orem's home was especially lively today. The laughter and chatter never stopped. With Joshua, the cheerful one, brightening the atmosphere, and the presence of the obedient and sweet Nicole, time flew past quickly. Orem and Ivy had also prepared gifts for the two children. Don't buy so many things next time. We have everything at home, there's no need to spend so much, Gale said. Ivy replied, that's not possible. Today is my first time meeting the children, so I definitely have to give them gifts. Besides, she looked at Orem. We are gifting them together. Before Gale could respond, Joshua already spoke up. Thank you, Ivy and my lovely Orem. Better call me Uncle Orem. Don't tease me, Orem said, patting his head. Joshua shook his head. No way, lovely makes you sound younger. To match Ivy's youth, he insisted on changing how he typically addressed Orem. Uncle Orem, you have to treat Ivy well. Love her, pamper her, respect her. Don't let her be sad, heartbroken, or suffer. Got it? Joshua instructed. Orem nodded. Yes, I got it, Nicole added. Such a beautiful lady, who would bear to see her sad? From the moment the children arrived, Ivy's smile had not faded. Initially, she was in a bad mood. Orem suddenly wanted to host a dinner. Knowing him, it was not a simple gathering. He never did anything without a reason. There had to be a purpose behind it. However, Orem did not make any moves even as the Wood family was about to leave. So, Ivy was almost certain she was Orem's target. This meal was to showcase their stable and loving relationship to Shawn and Gale, and also to serve as a legitimate reason to keep her at his place tonight. What awaited Ivy tonight was still unknown. I'm very happy. I'm very pleased to have met you today. If you have time, feel free to come and play with me anytime, Ivy said, crouching down to look at Joshua and Nicole. Joshua immediately asked, Ivy, where can I find you? Can I see you at Uncle Orem's place? You can call me. Okay, tell me your number and I'll remember it. Joshua was not reassured until he called and heard Ivy's phone ring. I'm leaving now, Ivy. Joshua waved, then shamelessly asked, Can I get another hug? Ivy laughed. Of course. She opened her arms and hugged Joshua. Suddenly she felt a warmth on her cheek. Joshua had planted a quick kiss on her cheek. Ivy was stunned for a moment. Everyone around was also taken aback. It was so mischievous. Chapter 1965. Bye-bye. Joshua was very shy at this moment. After kissing Ivy, he ran away, slipped behind Gale, and hid behind her with half of his head peeking out. He knew it was wrong to steal a kiss, but he could not help it. Moreover, he pecked her on her face. Joshua! Gale quickly pinched his ears. She was both angry and humorous, and did not know what to say. After a while, she controlled herself not to laugh out loud, and said with a serious face, This is not allowed, you know. Joshua, there are differences between men and women. Boys cannot kiss girls casually. But I'm not a boy, I'm a child. Gale was speechless. She could not hold herself any longer and wanted to laugh. His logic was sound. A kiss from a child on the cheek was truly innocent. Though it was not encouraged behavior, she wanted to change it. Some things must be taught and cultivated from an early age. Shawn, you need to educate your son. Gale directly threw the problem to him. Ivy said, It doesn't matter, he is indeed a child. He kissed me because he liked me. I didn't mind. On the contrary, I was very happy. Look! Joshua suddenly became more confident. Ivy herself agreed. Gale tugged Shawn's sleeve. Shawn glanced deeply at him. At your current age you can indeed kiss Ivy. He was stunned that Shawn defended him. Joshua had mentally planned a rebuttal, but suddenly there was no room for him to try it out. But you have to ask her for permission first. If she agrees, then you can kiss her. If she doesn't agree, you can't kiss her. Do you understand? Shawn said. Joshua nodded. I understand. Now let me practice. With that said, he ran out from behind Gale up to Ivy again. Ivy, can I kiss you? Shawn was speechless. Gale turned her head. How could she give birth to such a useless son? She was confused. Ivy was about to agree when Orem peeked. Joshua, your father has forgotten to teach you something else. If you want to kiss a girl, she agrees, but her boyfriend doesn't agree, and you can't kiss her either. Joshua looked at Shawn. Shawn nodded. Although he and Orem did not see eye to eye, he agreed with this principle. Okay. Next time when Uncle Orem isn't around, I'll ask Ivy for permission and kiss her, Joshua grumbled reluctantly. Gale could not stand it anymore and pulled him back. She now belongs to Orem. She has nothing to do with you. Stop dreaming, you can't have her, give up. Then she turned to Ivy. Kids are like this, don't mind him. It's getting late, we really should be going. Thank you for the invitation today. I'm happy for you both. Goodbye. Goodbye, Evie. Shawn and Ivy had no eye contact from start to finish. They did not even look at each other directly. Orem was observing the whole time, but he did not notice any slip-ups. Chapter 1966. However, Shawn had always been impossible to understand. Ivy was also very skilled at disguising her true feelings. No matter, the main event was yet to come. People could act, but evidence could not lie. After getting into the car, Shawn glanced in the rearview mirror. From this angle, he could see Ivy clearly. She was looking in this direction, her eyes somewhat fixed, lost in thought. Shawn's keen sense of perception made him aware that Orem could not have arranged this dinner just for the sake of it. There had to be another purpose. He hoped Ivy would be clever enough to protect herself, respond appropriately, and safeguard herself from Orem as much as possible. Even if she had to abandon evidence, she must prioritize her safety. As the vehicle drove away, Orem's home gradually returned to its quiet state. After the bustle, it felt empty again. I envy Gale even more now. Just seeing her marriage, I already thought she was incredibly lucky. Seeing her children, I feel like heaven must favor her too much, Ivy said softly, standing at the door. Favor her? Yes, her husband is tall, handsome, wealthy and faithful. Her kids are clever and adorable. She is gentle and beautiful, and she's a jewelry designer. Her life is perfect. Orem suddenly let out a cold snort. Ivy looked at him, puzzled. Ahem. Orem cleared his throat, covering up his earlier loss of composure. Some things can't be judged by appearances alone. Gale may seem very happy now, but that doesn't mean her life has always been smooth. Gale used to walk on thin ice because of Shawn. How could she be happy? Her life's pain and joy were all at the hands of Shawn alone. On the contrary, you are the truly fortunate one. You debuted as the lead in a drama, shot to fame, and established yourself in the entertainment industry. You've been a beauty since childhood, excellent in every aspect. Ivy, your life is also one that many envy, Orem said. Ivy looked at him. I used to think so too. She surely felt that way until she was violated by Paul. That was a stain on her life caused by Orem. How could she not hate him? Yet her heart was also moved by him. These two conflicting emotions struggled, entwined, and lingered within her. Alright, let's not talk about this. Ivy smiled. I can see that Joshua and Nicole are very close to you. I watched them grow UUP. He even protected Gale's children multiple times back then. Orem froze. Thinking back, he realized how foolish and selfless he was. If he had been a bit selfish, then Shawn would not have gotten Gale so easily, and Gale might have been his. Ivy glanced at the time and adjusted Orem's collar. I should go now. Your arrangements today were thoughtful and made me feel like a good hostess. It was nice, and I'll remember this day. She stood on tiptoe and kissed Orem on the lips. Was this not what dating was about? They were acting in love and cherishing each other sincerely. Yet, neither of them was true. As my girlfriend, you've always been the hostess here. How can you say you were just playing the part? Orem said. She smiled. There's a fundamental difference between a girlfriend and a wife. Orem asked, is that difference just a marriage certificate? If you want it, I can give it to you. Chapter 1967. Ivy's heart trembled uncontrollably. She knew it could not be this simple. She knew there was a catch, but she always found herself moved by Orem's words. That's too fast. Ivy shook her head. Let's take it slow. See, I'm willing to marry, but you're not willing to be doed. Ivy leaned into his chest, listening to his steady, powerful heartbeat. We have plenty of time. If the love is long-lasting, why worry about the morning and evening? Ivy said. However, the reality was her time with Orem was diminishing. Ivy closed her eyes. She gave herself 5 minutes to indulge. Orem quietly held her without speaking. It was actually a beautiful moment. After 5 minutes, Ivy pushed him away. I should get back to the hotel. I have scenes early tomorrow morning. Not staying the night? When a man asks a woman to stay the night, everyone understands what that means. No. Orem did not let go. I can take you back and make sure you don't miss your shoot. If it really doesn't work, I can give the crew half a day off and start shooting in the afternoon. Ivy laughed. Do you know how much it costs the crew to stop working for half a day? No problem. For you, it's worth it. The scene we're shooting tomorrow requires the early morning light. Mr. Orem, you can control the crew's break time, but you can't control the sunrise, can you? Ivy definitely would not stay. It was too dangerous. Although Orem would never touch her, as he still thought of her as dirty, what if something else happened? The more unpredictable and unknown, the more dangerous it represented. It was better to leave now. Ivy softened her voice as she said, I'll come over when I have a break. We don't have to be together every day. She tried to act coy. Men usually fell for this. Orem smiled gently. At this moment he resembled his old self a bit. Ivy kissed the corner of his lips and then started to pry his fingers off her one by one, ready to step back. Orem let her pry but showed no sign of letting go. They were secretly competing. Ivy's smile was becoming strained, but she tried to maintain it. What are you doing? So annoying. Just as she finally pulled his hand away and could retreat, an extremely bright light suddenly flashed in her eyes. Immediately after, the gates of his mansion opened, and the roar of an engine rumbled. A car drove in. The high lights were shining directly on Orem and Ivy. Ivy raised her hand to shield her eyes. It was so late already. Who could it be? The car door opened, and a man in black stepped out from the driver's seat. Mr. Lefting, the item has arrived. He handed a folder to Orem with both hands. Orem asked, Is everything I inside? Yes. You'll understand once you open it. Good. Chapter 1968. The man in black nodded, glanced at Ivy with a flash of admiration, and then left. Ivy felt uneasy under his gaze. Orem did not seem to care at all. He was focused on the folder in his hands. What is this? Someone drove all the way here to hand it to you personally this late at night, Ivy asked. This is something I've been waiting for all day. It arrived just at the right time. Ivy could not tell what was inside. It seemed like just a few thin sheets of paper. Then open it and deal with your matters. I won't disturb you. Even though I'm your girlfriend, you deserve your privacy, Ivy said. She hurriedly said this and still wanted to leave. Orem grabbed her elbow firmly. No, this document is for you. Ivy, you need to stay and open it with me. Ivy sensed something was off, but she could not figure out what. For me? Yes, let's go inside first. Orem almost forcefully dragged her into the villa, through the living room, upstairs, and finally to the study. His grip was so strong that Ivy felt like her bones were about to be crushed. Once in the study, Orem released her. Go ahead, open it. He nodded toward the folder. Take a look. 2. Be bold, it belongs to you. Ivy swallowed hard, her hands trembling slightly. Nonetheless, she picked up the folder, slowly opened it, and reached inside. A small, square piece of metal. Ivy did not need to look to know what it was. The touch was too familiar, she had felt it before. It was a bugging device. In those brief seconds, scenarios flashed through Ivy's mind. What? Take it out, Orem said. What is this thing? Ivy slowly pulled out the bugging device, pretending she had never seen it before. What is this? It's so tiny, like a USB drive. It's not a USB drive. Then what is it? You don't recognize it? Orem asked. Ivy's heart skipped a beat, but she immediately shook her head. I've never seen it before. A bugging device. Orem smiled. It can record all sounds within 10 meters, loud and clear. Why do you have something like this? That's not important, Orem said, leaning on the table with both hands, his eyes deeply fixed on her. What's important is that you're holding it right now. Ivy felt the device burning in her hand. She wanted to throw it away, but she could not. Tightening her grip on it, Ivy swallowed again. Why are you making me hold a bug? Don't rush, take your time. The game is just starting. Suspense makes it interesting. Orem glanced back at the folder. There's something else inside. Take it out. There's a piece of paper. Yes, that piece of paper is very useful. Ivy did as he said. She slowly pulled an A sheet from the folder, first seeing 3 bold black words. It read, Fingerprint Identification Report, Chapter 1969. Ivy's head felt like it was about to explode. Why was there a fingerprint report? Whose fingerprints were they analyzing? Hers? Then, Ivy looked at the bugging device she held in her left palm. Could they determine if she had ever touched the bugging device, or if she had seen it by checking for her fingerprints on it? This was bad. She was done for. Ivy had no idea that Orem's mind was so meticulous that he would go as far as to analyze the fingerprints on the bugging device. No wonder that when she arrived at the Orem house, he had considerately taken her bag and casually handed it to the butler to put away. It seemed thoughtful, but in reality, he was taking out the device from her bag and sending it for analysis right away. Today, Ivy deliberately carried that bag. Ever since she discovered the bugging device, she had not touched that bag again. She had an instinctive repulsion and fear toward it. However, she had to carry it that day, intentionally showing it to Orem to indicate she knew nothing about the bugging device. Who could have known Orem was even more formidable than she had imagined? Bugging device, fingerprints. What does this mean? I don't understand, Ivy said. You'll know once you look. However, Ivy's hand stopped moving, and she did not pull out the analysis report. Seeing this, Orem grabbed her wrist, helping her out, and then looked straight at her. The analysis report was there, clear as day. The bugging device had Ivy's fingerprints on it. It was undeniably confirmed. Orem's finger tapped on the conclusion section. Do you have anything to say? Ivy's fingernails dug into her palm hard. Orem pressed. Didn't you say you hadn't seen it, didn't know what it was? Then why does it have your fingerprints on it? I really haven't seen it. How could something I've never seen have my fingerprints? Yes, it's very strange. Orem, where did you get this from? Orem looked at her with a mocking smile, knowing she was still pretending. Seeing the results he already knew, he still answered her question. From your bag. My bag? When did it have such a thing? Ivy frowned. Since it's from my bag, isn't it normal for it to have my fingerprints? I take things out of my bag every day. I could touch it intentionally or unintentionally. She pretended to play with the bugging device. Who put this in my bag? Orem slowly sat down. Keep acting, go on. He had already laid his cards on the table. Ivy did not take the bait. She could not admit it because once she did, it would be all over. What are you talking about? Ivy glanced at him. A bugging device suddenly appears in my bag, suddenly has my fingerprints on it. It's all very inexplicable. She put everything back on the table. I should leave now. If I stay any later, I won't need to sleep, and I can just start getting ready for makeup and shooting as soon as I get to the set. Orem did not stop her. He remained seated. Ivy stayed calm, steadily walking toward the door. Orem knew she had found the bugging device, so what should he do? It did not matter. She would leave first and then figure out the next step based on Mr. Wood's advice. She knew he would back her up. With him around, she was not fighting alone. She was not just holding on by herself. Mr. Wood would have a solution. Ivy had already gripped her phone tightly, planning to contact Shawn as soon as she left the Orem. Only Shawn knew how precarious her situation was right now, and he would send people to protect. Ivy pulled down the study door handle. Luckily the door opened and was not locked. Chapter 1970. Her relief lasted only 2 seconds. As she exited, Ivy looked up and saw 2 tall bodyguards standing firmly at the door. "Miss Park, please come back." Please come back." The bodyguards pushed her back into the study and closed the door behind her. Ivy took a few steps back, stumbled, and fell to the floor. She tried to get up again but found herself without strength. Cold sweat broke out on her back, one wave after another. "The ground is cold and dirty." Orem walked over, extending his hand toward her. "Come Ivy, let me help you up." He was so gentle. However, Ivy only felt colder and more afraid of what was to come. After hesitating for a few seconds, she reluctantly placed her hand in his palm. Orem gently pulled her up from the ground. She bumped into his embrace. However, before Ivy could react, Orem abruptly grabbed her by the neck. "I'm not patient enough to continue this charade with you." Orem's true face was fully exposed. "Ivy, I really underestimated you. You pretended for so long. If I hadn't kept my suspicions about you, you might have fooled me completely. That day in my office, when you were touching up your makeup in the bathroom, how could you not have heard anything? Were you wearing headphones? You're quite clever to come up with such a trick. Even if you were wearing headphones, you should have noticed the sounds of people talking outside, footsteps. Once you took off the headphones and heard my conversation with Paul, there's no way you could have put them back on." As he spoke, Orem tightened his grip even more. Ivy felt like she could not breathe, suffocating. "I, too didn't. She struggled to speak. "You are still denying it." Orem's forehead bulged with veins, showing how strong his grip was. It was beyond what Ivy could bear. The air in her lungs was slowly thinning. Was she going to die at Orem's hands today? Admit it, and I'll let you go," Orem pressed on. "I didn't." Ivy still stubbornly refused to admit it. "You really aren't afraid of death. With this evidence you're still trying to argue. You look delicate and weak, but I never imagined you had such a strong backbone." Orem said. "Tell me, Ivy, after you heard in my office that day and left, did you call Shawn and tell him everything?" Ivy's pupils contracted. How did he know she called Shawn? Orem read her expression. "I've always suspected you, that's why I've scrutinized every move you made. Ivy, are you sure you want to choose Shawn over me?" He resembled a devil returned from hell. He was far from a gentleman, full of malice and hostility. Ivy closed her eyes. The lack of oxygen had already made her dizzy. If this continued, she might really suffocate and die. Tears streamed uncontrollably from the corners of Ivy's eyes. What made Ivy truly sad was not just being discovered and exposed by Orem. It was more heartbreaking because Orem had never truly cared for her. He could hug her, kiss her, be attentive and caring, yet in an instant, he could turn around and want her dead. Orem could pretend to love her and also try to kill her. He had never loved her at all. Ivy thought that perhaps after being together for some time, they would develop some genuine feelings for each other.